Well, hiya, BookTube. Bill Ruttenberg here with the Ruttenberg Library, and I wanted to do a tag on this Friday morning. Wanted to do the History Reading Challenge tag. So I did the TBR for the History Reading Challenge yesterday, and I wanted to do the tag that went along with that. I got tagged by Jack at the Rambling Ranketer, and I've seen this done by numerous people. I saw it on Sean D. Standfast's, excuse me, Steve Donahue's, saw Mark at Richardson's Reads, and then this tag was created by Justin at the Ghost Reader, and I believe it was a combo of 4 people: Justin at the Ghost Reader, Emma at A Cup of Books, Justin at Triumphal Reads, and Jenny at Bookish Shenanigans. I think they were all the original creators. So I'll put the link to all of those different channels in the description box below, and you can go check out all of them. I watched all of them, and I thoroughly enjoyed all of the different perspectives on everything and the different books, and got some new ideas for books, and anyway, I loved listening to them. So thank you for doing that. Thank you to Jack for tagging me, and let's get started. So the History Reading Challenge tag. So the first question: what first got you into history? Of the entire tag, this is probably excuse me, probably the hardest question for me, because I kept trying to think about what got me into reading history or into history in general, and I think I need to probably backtrack to I wanted to be a teacher first. When I was going through school, I'm one of those lucky ones that I knew what I wanted to do for my career for a long time, and it hasn't changed. The avenue that I was going to go, as far as I thought about being an elementary teacher, and then I went down and I was an aide down in the office, a teacher's aide, and I worked in the office, and I saw elementary kids, and I knew that wasn't for me. I thought about being a PE teacher. I thought about being an ag teacher. That's the route my brother went. And then history teacher was always on the list as well. But, I was kind of juggling between all of those, trying to figure out which direction I wanted to go. So teaching's always been there for me. And what got me into history, and then later reading more and more history, was my teachers themselves. My teacher, Kenneth Richley, who passed away, was it a year or 2 ago? Anyway, he was one of my high school history teachers, and I absolutely loved his class. And I took a civics government class with him my freshman year. Took world geography, world history. I'm pretty sure the world history class was with him. I took an economics class with him, and I just really got into the social studies aspect. And since his last year was my senior year and he knew I was going into teaching, he gave me all of his teaching stuff. Of course, it was history stuff. And so he passed along that love of history to me. And then I got into college, and I was really lucky, and I had 4 professors that were just, in my opinion, great. I thoroughly enjoyed them. And this was when I was at Missouri Western. And my all-time favorite was Dr. Stephen Griert. He taught early American history, and I took classes with him throughout my college experience, and absolutely loved his teaching style. It really drew me in. I use a lot of his styles in my classroom, and he got me into early American history, and that's what I teach now. Of course, when I first started teaching, my first 2 years, it was actually recent American history, from about World War I to the present, and that's where my book collecting and reading got started, but not real heavy. When I moved to middle school and I started teaching early American history, that's when my book collecting really started to grow, and my love of history just grew by leaps and bounds. I also had another teacher, Dr. Tryphon, Daniel Tryphon. He was a military historian and European historian. Absolutely loved his class. I had Dr. Patrick McClear. He did recent American history. He was an economics historian, or that's what he specialized in. I had Dr. Kim Schutte. She was British history, European history, and she was always fun because she always gave a little bit of an alternative point of view from the male teachers. It was from that female perspective, and that was always fun. And she always liked to center in on the women of history and the queens, and that was always a lot of fun listening to her and just getting that different perspective. And so that really got me into history. My teachers played a huge role in my life, and so I greatly appreciate them. Thank you to all teachers out there, by the way. We are up for a challenge this year. Number 2, what is your favorite history book or author? So what I did was I went through my reading list or my book collection list, and I went and started looking at who do I have the most of. And, you know, because if I've got more books by that author, it probably means I enjoy that author. So I started going through there. My favorite authors are Robert Middlecoff for American Revolution, Bernard Bailyn, Colonial America, James McPherson, The American Civil War, Gordon Wood for early U.S. history, Stephen Ambrose, World War II. But he also wrote 2 books, Undaunted Courage and Nothing Like It in the World, which are actually my 2 favorite of his, even though they're not World War II. But the bulk of his stuff is World War II. H.W. Brands is one of the best storytellers of all time, any era. He is absolutely awesome. He is, if I had to rank these authors, he is one of the most readable authors. He's way up at the top of the list of one of my favorites. And I love listening to his book talks and on YouTube and iTunes University and stuff like that. I love listening to his stuff. He is a fabulous storyteller. If you ever get a chance, go check him out. H.W. Brands. Bruce Canton in the Civil War, Joseph Ellis in Colonial America and early U.S. history, another really good storyteller, very entertaining. Alan Gelzo, he's a Lincoln historian, does Civil War stuff. Harold Holzer is Lincoln and Civil War. David McCullough, just an awesome storyteller, and he's got lots of different eras that he's worked with. Edmund Morgan, Colonial America, early U.S. history. Nathaniel Philbrick, another awesome storyteller who's done stuff on a lot of different areas, but the bulk of his books of late have been late colonial, early U.S., right in there. And then Robert Remini is another good one. He's done some stuff with Andrew Jackson, big old biography series on Andrew Jackson, but I really like his stuff. And there's many, many more. Those are just a handful of them. I don't want to bog you down with just a huge list. But so anyway, question number 3. What is the most anticipated history book you have not read yet? Okay, so the 2 that I'm really anticipating are not out yet. That's why I haven't read them yet. But H.W. Brands' new book that's coming out in October of this year, The Zealot and the Emancipator, John Brown, Abraham Lincoln, and the Struggle for American Freedom. And it's part of that 1850s time period, that the antebellum period, that is my favorite to learn about. And it's got Lincoln in it, and I love learning about Lincoln. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to Rick Atkinson's 2nd volume of his American Revolution trilogy. I read the first one and absolutely loved it. I think he does a really good job from that military perspective. I have no idea when that one's coming out. So question number 4. What is your favorite time period and why? What do you want to read or have read about it? So my all-time favorite is the antebellum period, 1848 to 1860. There was just so much going on in the United States at that point, and I think it's just a neat time period because the U.S. We were going through growing pains, heading westward expansion and all that's going on. But the reason I find it fascinating is we were in that process of fixing the biggest moral dilemma, slavery. We were in the process of trying to get rid of that, and you get to see the different stages of that happen. There's all kinds of stuff going on. Let's see here. A lot of different people to learn about. It's not just one event. There's just multiple events all through that decade. It was a pretty fast-paced, exciting decade to live in. That's what I would picture anyway. If I was living in that, it would be. I mean, there's just stuff going on all around you. There's a big changeover in leadership at that time period. The old guard was dying, literally. The big three, Daniel Webster, Henry Clay, and John C. Calhoun, were all dying in the early 1850, I think, to 1852, right in that time period. They're all dying, and then you've got the new guard coming in. You got Stephen Douglas, you got William Seward, you got Charles Sumner, you got all just Abraham Lincoln. You got all these new guys that are going to start taking control in the government, and so there's that huge changeover in leadership, which is that's always fascinating when these guys that have been in the government for 30, 40, 50 years, and they all start dying off, and you start to see a new way of doing things. I think you could probably find that in any time period, but this is one that I especially like to learn about. And some books that I've read about that. Recently I read David Potter's The Impending Crisis, 1848 to 1860. Excellent account of the entire time period. Now, I think he does a very good or a very fair assessment of everything that's going on. He doesn't jump to one side or the other. He tries to look at both sides, and and he calls it like he sees it. It's good. I also like Robert Rimini's book At the Edge of the Precipice. It was a book on the Compromise of 1850 and how it changed America. And that's just if you've never read about the Compromise of 1850, you need to go look at that, because there's just so much in that. And it was it was a compromise, like it was meant to bring people together, but the law in the end ended up being very, very divisive. And that's the point where the old guard and the new guard, the big switch over is right there at the Compromise of 1850. So it's just fascinating. The other time period I really like learning about, and I teach this, is the American Revolution. And I'm going to actually back up not just the war, but the Revolutionary period. So I'm going to go clear back to the end of the French and Indian War, 1763 to 1783, that 20-year block of time, the creation of our nation, beginning the ideals of our nation, and the efforts that were put in to create this nation. I think it's fascinating. I know Steve Donahue talked about Robert Middlecoff's The Glorious Cause, and that is, I totally agree with him. That is an awesome account of that 20-year period. It's a big book. It's from that Oxford History of the United States series, which I absolutely love. I would just highly recommend that book. If you watch Steve's video, he does a really good job talking about it. And then another one for this era, Joseph Ellis. He does a really good job of looking at, he writes biographies on this period, and he does a really good job of looking at individual accounts of those founding fathers. And I thoroughly enjoy. I think he's a good storyteller. He keeps you tied into the story, keeps your interest. So number 5, what time period would you like to learn more about? And what book do you want to read or have read about it? And for me, it's all of it. I don't know if there's a particular, I mean I'm going to list a couple, but I mean, every time I read something new, I get more and more fascinated by history itself. Just the overwhelming wealth of knowledge out there about history, and different time periods, and how the points of view of that history change. And just in today's world right now, the histories that are coming out are fascinating, because now it's not just from a leader's point of view. Now historians are looking at it from average Joe's point of view, and they're starting to look at them from the viewpoints of Native Americans, African Americans, if we're speaking American history here, and women's perspectives, and I just think it's making history all the more enjoyable for me to be able to see that more well-rounded viewpoint on things. So I know that's a really generic answer, just everything, but that's really the truth of the matter. The more I go to bookstores, the more book sales I go to, I start picking stuff up, and just my interest grows and grows, and I just don't have enough time in the day to read it. That's the problem. But anyway, if I'm going to pick some particular eras, I've been teaching world history, and I need to grow in that area with my knowledge. And so I've had a couple eras that have fascinated me, and one of those eras was, the monarch period from Henry VIII through James I. That one, for whatever reason, piques my interest. So when I see books on that, I've been starting to buy those up. I watched the show Reign on TV. It was a fun little show about Mary, Queen of Scots. Not always historically accurate, but I mean, it was enough fun that it made you want to go out and Google it to see what is true and what is not true. And I always think that's neat when a TV show can do that, can pique your interest in that way. So I've been I've read a couple biographies on Mary, Queen of Scots, and another queen in the era, and I want to keep reading about that. It's so interesting. The backstabbing, the manipulation. It's like a giant soap opera. I never thought that. You laugh at soap operas because you're like, yeah, you're never going to see that in real life. But if you read about the era of those kings and queens, you see the soap opera. Just very interesting. I want to learn more about the Middle Ages. I think they're interesting. I created a unit in that world history class that revolves around the Middle Ages, and I want to learn more about that. And then just overall, Africa and Asia. I don't know very much about that. I got to thinking back to college, and I do not recall at the time that I was in that college any classes being taught about Africa and Asia. None. I went to take my exit exams for the history department, and how many? It was, I bet, half to 60%, somewhere in there, of the questions were on Africa and Asia. And the only reason I had passed that test in that part of it was because I was teaching a high school class, and I had to go out and further research stuff, and that's how I learned. It wasn't because of any classes that I took. And so I'd really like to take that part of my my own personal learning experience, and I want to grow in that area. So number 6, who is your favorite person in history? What book do you want to read or have read about him? Okay, so if you've followed the channel, this is a pretty easy question. You probably already know the answer, but those that are new to the channel, Abraham Lincoln. I've had a fascination with him since I was in high school, back into middle school probably, and he's always been my favorite guy to read about and learn about. He is the American dream. Started out dirt poor and made his way in life so that he was president of the United States. And so my book collection is pretty extensive on Lincoln. I'm coming up on the 100 book mark on Abraham Lincoln, and so if I was to, one of the books I want to read that I have and I have not read it yet is David Herbert Donald's biography on him, Lincoln. Just haven't got to it yet. And I want to finish reading John Hay and John Nicolay's series of biographies. It was like a 10-book series. And I've read the first couple, and so I want to read I think I've read the first 2, maybe the first 3, but I think it's the first 2 is what I'm on. I've been trying to read one every summer, and I didn't read one this summer. But anyway, I want to read the last 8. And then I've just got lots and lots of books on Lincoln that I've read. It would take forever to go through those, so I'm not going to bore you with the details. But the other guys that I've always liked reading about, George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, and the most recent one in the last couple years has been Theodore Roosevelt. I think they're all fascinating in their own way. They are not perfect human beings, and I'm not trying to claim that. I hope nobody thinks that. All 4 of those guys all have their faults in one way or another. I could pick them apart, but I just find them fascinating to learn about in their lives, their roles in history. So, number 7. What history topic would you like to see more fiction, nonfiction books about? And as I said, Africa. I want to see more biographies on the leaders of Africa, and this would be more the older stuff for me personally. I want to see more on the older stuff. I read it was probably a middle school, high school age book, and it was, I mean, it was kind of small, but it was like, what was it, the golden years of Africa or something like that, and it centered in on just a few of the major leaders of Africa, and I thought that was fascinating. I learned a lot of stuff, and I want to continue that, and some of it I need to go out and research and find the biographies, because I know there's some that have been put out, but I'd like to see more. There's a huge role that they played in history that I think tends to get overlooked. I read a book on Genghis Khan, and that thing was mind-blowing. It was by Jack, and of course I won't remember his last name. Oh goodness, is he from the University of Minnesota or something like that? But Weatherford, Jack Weatherford. Hopefully that's right. I will put the name down here if I'm wrong. But anyway, I read a book on Genghis Khan that came out not that long ago, and he's got a whole series of books on the Mongolian tribes, and that was fascinating. Just you don't hear a whole lot about him in the average high school class, and he played such an enormous role in history. And he's got I think the largest, by the time he was done and his grandkids took over, that empire was, I believe, the largest in world history. It was huge, absolutely huge. And so I would like to learn more about Genghis Khan, and then all the way down into like Kublai Khan. Number 8. What non-book resources do you enjoy when learning about history? All right, so I love documentaries. I check out History Channel. There is, what is it, the American Heroes Channel or something like that. AHC is another, I think that's the name of it, another documentary channel that I enjoy watching. I enjoy Smithsonian Channel, where they've got documentaries. YouTube's got like plenty of stuff out there if you go hunting. So I love documentaries. Maps. I have always loved maps since I was a little boy. And, National Geographic, of course, has probably the best maps in them. But there's also some new maps that have been put in some of the newer books. Let's see. His book, hang on 2 seconds. Give me 2 seconds here. They're computer done. Yeah. And let's see. Has this got his name in it? The map maker's name? It doesn't, but I can show you. This might not even be the exact one that I'm talking about. But, maps like that, that was from an army at dawn, war in North Africa. Those newer maps like that, absolutely love them. I took Nathaniel Philbrick's book, and I copied all those maps off, and I used them in my classroom. I just think they're just awesome. So I love to learn by using maps. I love listening to iTunes University. I put that on when I'm working in my classroom, doing different things around the room. I'll put that on out loud on the speakers, and I listen to teachers from Yale, Harvard, Stanford, and I get a free education from universities that cost a lot of money. But I really enjoy listening to those teachers that put their stuff out there, and it's all, like I said, all free. The Great Courses, which is a video series that you can get. It's adult learning. I love those. I've done some of those. So anyway, that's probably enough. Number 9, favorite history quote or fun fact. So I picked one. I like this quote. I don't know if it's my all-time favorite, but I like it. And it comes from Michael Crichton, actually. And I'll be honest, I can't remember. I thought it was from the book Timeline, but I couldn't find it in there. And maybe it's in there and I just didn't see it. But it's from one of his books, because he always puts quotes at the beginning of the chapters. And so it's either from one of his books, or maybe I just Googled history quotes for my classroom, because I put different quotes up on the board. So anyway, the quote is, "If you don't know history, then you don't know anything. You're a leaf that doesn't know it is a part of a tree." And I really like that quote, because it says a lot of stuff. you need to know your past to be able to look at the future and try to figure things out and how to do and not to do things. You know, I was doing genealogy there and I still do a little bit, but like I was heavily into genealogy there for a time period, and you know, that second part of that, you are a leaf that doesn't know it's a part of a tree. You got to know where you came from. You got to know your background to understand where, you know, you got to know where you came from to understand where you're going. And I just think that is so very, very important. And I think history does not get the importance it should. And anyway, last one, number 10, shout out a booktuber you enjoy who also reads history. So I'm going to give you two of them. I don't believe they have done this tag. If they have, forgive me, but I follow their channel, and I don't think they did. So I'm going to shout out Peg at the History Shelf. She does all kinds of history. Her specialties are Civil War and Russian history, but I'd love to hear her take on this. She's always got great stuff. And then I want to shout out Todd at Todd's Bursting Bookshelf. And he has got a tremendous library of books. If you want to learn, if you want to see some titles on world history, and I love his American history titles as well, but he has opened my eyes to world history and different biographies on leaders around the world. They are so diverse. I mean, he's got stuff about everything, and I truly appreciate that man's love of history. He does an excellent job, and Peg does an excellent job, and they both promote history, and I love it. And so go check out their channels. I'll put the links to those down below, but I'd like to see them do this tag, so I tagged those two. So anyway, BookTube, this has been my history reading challenge tag. Thank you for watching. I know it got a little bit long, but it's kind of hard to do this one without making it long. So until next time, happy reading.